Welcome to this class on the business planning process. This is a large topic and we've broken it into several shorter videos. So this is part 2. It's to be presumed you've looked at part 1 at this stage. So let's continue with the business planning process. First of all, let's look at management and objectives. First of all, the importance of objectives in the planning process. Well, we need to set out targets, or the business community or the business managers need to set out targets, specific goals. These are essential to give focus to the process. Without targets, there's no end, there's no clear delineated path for the business to follow. So it is important to specify the end, to specify the target. Otherwise it is directionalist. And there must be some method of measuring how well or not the organization is meeting the planning objectives. So the outcomes need to be measured, and some criteria needs to be set out as to whether the objectives are being successfully met or there is failure in the system, and where perhaps that failure arises, and some analysis of the causes of it. But there must be measuring sticks. There must be some objective in the future, and the business must know whether it's moving in the right direction towards that target or not, and that must be measurable. So there must be some sort of criteria set out, and there must be commitment on the part of the organization to meet the objectives, to identify the targets, to set up the planning process, and to move the organization in line with the agreed plan. And in fact, the plan itself must be achievable. It must be realistic. Otherwise, the managers, and at the various levels, the managers will not subscribe to the plan and will not try their utmost to achieve the plan. And in order to achieve this plan, it must not just be understood widely by the management, and there must be commitment, but there must be motivation. There must be something that drives the management to want to achieve the plan. The plan obviously will give some sort of focus to the organization and to what it's trying to achieve. It tries to handle uncertainties and contingencies that may arise in the future. And maybe that in itself is sufficient motivation. People want to maintain their lifestyles and continue to work for the organization, perhaps. That's the motivation. Or it may be that they want to work for an organization that's dynamic and leading the market and innovating, or whatever the plan states. So there must be some sort of motivation within the management team to achieve the objectives or the targets set out in the plan. There is a term used relating to this, which is management by objectives. This involves a detailed and integrated management system based on set objectives. It encourages participation and engagement based on measurable objectives. So the management are given objectives, the plan sets out the objectives, and the management try to achieve the objectives. And that's breaking the plan down into perhaps smaller parts that each manager could relate to and try to achieve his or her objective. Now, the ends, means and priorities. Well, the ends, means chain of objectives. The objectives should be ranked according to importance. Sometimes lower level objectives must be achieved before the higher level. Care and attention is needed to ensure that the objectives are sequenced in the correct manner. So it's not just a question of listing out all of the objectives, it's a question of prioritizing and seeing what is the ranking, how are these things going to be achieved, what's the time scale, where do they fit into the time scale. It's similar to managing a project. And project management, you have a time scale, you have a plan, a planning horizon, you have a set amount of resources in each part of the planning phase, and all of these must be coordinated and linked. But above all, priorities must be set within that, and it doesn't mean that the higher order priorities get the first treatment. It could be lower order objectives that need to be met first. Depends. The priorities. Well, priorities organise a to-do list of objectives according to importance. Clearly, important and critical priorities demand more and immediate attention. So priorities is organising what must be done and when they must be done, how they must be done, given the available resources. And there must be agreement amongst the management as to that ranking of priorities in order for them to be achieved effectively. So talking of priorities, one approach is the ABC system. This is simply A, which what must be done, what must do. These are critical. These are absolutely essential priorities. Must happen. And then we have the should do objectives. These ones would improve performance and they're desirable. But you can live without them. But really need to be addressed at some stage. And C, which are the nice to do objectives. These are desirable but not critical for the survival or improved performance. Just, it would be nice to have this. So it's not must, it's not should, just nice. So ABC. I'm not too sure how the ABC link to the terms must, should and nice, but that's what it's called, the ABC system. There's also a Pareto analysis, which is the 80-20. This is often spoke about in terms of priorities. It's the law of the vital few, the principle of factor scarcity. It states that for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. So perhaps 20% of the effort generates 80% of the effect. It's a question of prioritizing and knowing which 20% that needs to be completed first, because that will bring in the bulk, the vast majority of the outcome. And that's known as the 80-20 principle in Pareto, the Pareto analysis. The control cycle. Well, the control cycle is it sets out the core objectives and the timescale of the business, and it attempts to control the plan and what's happening around the plan in order to ensure its delivery according to the timescale that's set. It incorporates control functions, and the control functions guide and monitor activities it looks at deviations from the plan, and then it attempts to monitor and communicate those deviations and to bring the plan back into line and to achieve the objectives set out in the plan. So control functions could be subcommittees looking at the overall business plan, or it could be some designated head of department or whoever whose job it is to control the functions to ensure that deviations are corrected monitored, and steps are taken to ensure that perhaps it doesn't happen again. The planning process, it may use feedbacks from controls to improve after plans, and or to alter plans, I should say, and to implement the corrective actions where necessary. The planning process itself is like a learning process. It updates itself, and those participating in the process will constantly be looking critically at the plan and the possibilities of failure on different parts of the plan, or indeed overall failure of the plan, and integrating some sort of mechanisms to ensure that the plan itself survives and can carry the organisation to meet its overall objectives. So there's feedback within the system. You implement the plan gives feedback, and the feedback is fed back into the planning process, which updates the plan. And out of this, a stronger plan is developed. It's based partially on experience. The experience of trying to implement the old plan updates the new plan. Now the control cycle, well, there's the planning phase in which the plans are thought up. Then there's the implementation of the plan, and monitoring deviations from the plan. The control phase, corrective variations from the plan. So there are corrective measures put in place to put any deviations back into line. And having done that, they implement the corrective or the corrections to the plan. So they implement anything which is spotted, which is causing a problem for the plan, and also, of course, they update the plan itself. So the control cycle, I'll put the cursor on the screen, it starts here with the planning phase, goes to implementing the plan, and then monitoring any problems with the plan, then looking at corrective measures that are necessary to deal with the deviations, implementing the corrections, going back here again, looking at monitoring deviations again, having corrected some previously. And once you get to this stage, it also updates the plan. It updates the plan so that the plan becomes stronger in the next phase and there are less deviations. Introduces us to a term called synergy. The concept that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In economics, this is called economies of scale, sometimes written as 1 + 1 = 3. When individual components are put together, the overall effect is much greater than the individual components would have separately. This means as organizations get bigger, they become more specialized and they're able to mesh production more efficiently together, have more specialized machinery, specialized people, personnel. They're able to negotiate better terms from the banks. So bigger organizations are more efficient in some respects, or in many respects, than the smaller organizations. We call this economy of size or economy of scale. It's the subject of a separate video. For example, production components, machinery, administration and other functions need to be synchronized to optimize, I-S-E, sorry about that, efficiency. Synergy happens when production functions fit smoothly together. Now, the types of synergy. Well, we have market synergy, placing existing products in new markets. So the existing products are already developed. There's no research and development needed. They've been tried and tested perhaps in some given market, and they're placed into new markets. It's just a question of setting up the logistics perhaps to get the products to the new markets. We've cost synergy as well. Savings from combinations of common-based operations, resources, facilities, warehousing, for example. Perhaps warehousing can be shared between different products. Buying, the buyer and the buying department could buy for 2 products as opposed to 1. And some of the admin functions could also be shared, salaries, so on. Marketing could be shared as well, perhaps. The marketing team could be put to work on marketing a second product. There's also technological synergy, the transfer and application of existing technologies to new products and markets. If a product has an incorporated technology, a particular set of attributes that make it interesting in the market, then perhaps it could be delivered in several markets. The technology is transferable. It can be done in different places. So why not? There is synergy between the markets. And there's management synergy. Sharing common core functions to different markets. The management deal with two markets perhaps as opposed to 1. But they're simply looking at the markets as they would look at 1. They're looking at 1 and looking at the attributes of the market, the characteristics of the market. They're looking at the second market and looking at the attributes and the characteristics of the market. So the management team have the skills and competencies perhaps to deal with 2 markets. There may be specialists required for particular situations, specialist knowledge of local markets, culture and so on, but there's a lot of synergy, a lot of savings that can be made by joining products together, markets together in this way. So management can be shared, technology could be shared, costs perhaps could be shared as well. Michael Porter put forward generic competitive strategies. A competitive advantage, well, that's when a plan should show how to compete in selected markets and what advantages the business has in that context. What exactly is the competitive advantage that the business has got? Is it cheaper? Has it got a better product, a better reputation? Is the quality better? How is it perceived in the market? What's the history of the product? What's the competitive advantage? What has the product got that the competitors don't have? What's the scope of the product? The plan should specify with justification the extent of the market that should be targeted. Perhaps not all the market should be targeted. Perhaps some segment of the market should be dealt with. So what exactly is the product aiming at? Who's it aiming at? What segment is it aiming at? And why? Could it be widened? Or should it be restricted? Should it be a specialist product or more generic? So the competitive scope needs to be dealt with in the plan. And there's a cost leadership issue that may arise. If the company is very efficient and low cost, that should provide a competitive advantage in pricing over the competitors. So there's always a question of dealing with new technology, integrating the technology as a means of cost saving, so as to make the business even more competitive in those markets. and that will secure its position in the market. So the plan should have some recognition of the need to be cost effective. Differentiation, well, commitment to research and development is obviously one way to differentiate the product. Products tend to mutate over time. They tend to look different or have different attributes, or they tend to have extra add-ons or greater functionality or whatever it is. So commitment to research and development enables them to develop the product, and it creates a brand loyalty. There are lots of examples of this in the world. People who use Apple technology are very much committed, it appears, to the Apple brand. The same happened with Sony. Well, not so much nowadays, but perhaps Sony will come again. So there is commitment to certain brands, and the brands themselves are constantly being updated and improved. So a differentiation on the basis of that should be mentioned in the plan as well. Okay, so the cost function, or the cost focus, I should say, sorry, strategy. The plan may emphasize cost control as a means to gaining a competitive edge in the market. This may lead to dominance in the segment. Well, presumably the plan will have achieved its objectives if it becomes dominant in the segment. If that's what it was aiming at and it achieves it, then it's a job well done. The mechanism to get there, of course, is always an issue. The mechanism to deal with the problems and the issues that could arise in terms of environmental change and competitor response, these also need to be integrated into the plan, and some contingency response laid out, that in the event of this happening, the first line of defense will be whatever. Focused differentiation is attempting to achieve a competitive edge in a small segment of the market. Rely on branding, for example, or reputation, and perception of superior quality. It's maybe done by repetitive advertising, for example, where the idea of the product becomes trendy amongst a certain segment of the market. That may be a response. It may be differentiated in many ways. It could be physical differentiation. It looks different. It may have a reputation for quality and for innovation, good value for money. And all of these issues need to be addressed in one way or another within the plan, which means that the plan itself is potentially quite a large document incorporating the marketing strategy as well as production, logistics, the R&D, the direction, the objectives, and the mission statement, which encapsulates all of it into a very few words, which enables the stakeholders to identify exactly what the business is aiming to achieve. So that's part 2 of a long talk on the planning process. So let's leave it there for now. Thank you for watching.